This seems like, that this is an era of fakeness. This is an era of fakeness. No real feelings in the world. A word on your past influencers, John Pilger and Harold Pinter.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning. In his Nobel lecture, the British playwright Harold Pinter talks about, a bit like the paradigm I just mentioned of sort of creative endeavor versus professional endeavor. He talks about art and politics and the different truths in each sphere. So he says, in art, you can have something that is both true and false. In other words, there's a subjectivity, and that completely resonates with me. At the same time, in politics, truth is black and white. And for us, it means that in Gaza, the child died, Hind Rajab died, or she didn't die. Well, she did die. But when you zoom out of those sorts of questions, the world does become grayer. And he goes on, having developed this point and bringing in some of his theatrical playwriting works as examples, he immediately falls in to talk about the war in Iraq, Bush, Blair, the lies, the war on terror, the killing in Iraq, and how words have lost meaning as lies have permeated the political sphere. And he talks about, in the end, or towards the end, he talks about a vast tapestry of lies upon which we feed, and that populations must remain in ignorance of the truth, even the truth of their own lives, for this juggernaut of lies and violence and American exceptionalism to continue. I mean, many people that criticized the speech said it was sort of an anti-American thing. I mean, it's complete bullshit, of course, but you have to remember it's sort of post-Iraq sphere. Now, moving on to 2025, I think that the tapestry of lies is now more like a bath of lies, meaning that we're now bathing in lies. Or if not lies, we're now bathing in stupefaction or bathing in content that stupefies us. Meaning what? Meaning the normalization of violence and sort of human civilizational breakdown has got worse. We see the genocide, it's projected onto our retina. We see the climate crisis. It's as if nothing's happening. So we have that sort of wider sense of chaos and lack of control and disorder. But then we've never been so stupefied with content that hits our dopamine receptor, and the content gets shorter and shorter. And then going back to the political sphere more concretely, the lies just seem to just continue. I mean, particularly in the UK, you just have this sense that the political class is just among the worst of us in terms of intellectual capability and honesty. You know, they're just like sort of mid-range parrots that just sort of say what they've been told by the whips. A real mediocrity, a tyranny of mediocrity, really. So in the sort of official power, you have this mediocrity and this sense of chaos and disorder. And then in the private sphere, you have this content which just stupefies and distracts us. And I think if you put this all together, the scene is indeed more disordered than it was when Pinter made his speech for the Nobel Prize. He talked about a vast tapestry of lies as if it's something much more external that we watch or perceive, that it's still in a somehow ordered form. But I think the sense now with COVID, with in the UK Brexit, with, as I say, climate change, violence, with Trump, all of this disorder and disarray, I feel that if it was a vast tapestry, the tapestry has now fallen on our face and is like a rug that is suffocating us. I feel that it's a much more immediate sense, and I feel that now voices of meaningful dissent, any meaningful intellectual resistance or coherence is ever smaller and harder to find. And then we come on to John Pilger, is my key example for that, because even John Pilger was effectively an anomaly when he was broadcast on mainstream television. My parents' generation, or their parents' generation, John Pilger was known, but he was on ITV, not always prime time, towards the end of his actual broadcast career. It would be after even the 10 o'clock news or whatever, 11 p.m. even. But even he, or his intellectual space, became smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, to the extent that after a while, he wasn't really on television. I mean, some of his later films were, but it was almost like a midnight screening kind of thing. And he then ended up, to speak of the late John Pilger, may rest in peace, ended up having more airtime on RT than on British media. So I think it is fair and objective to say this intellectual space is shrinking over time, and the distraction, if I can say the dopamine distraction culture, is increasing with time. And I feel that the overall impression is that we're suffocating under that weight. That's how I see it.